We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andrew, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered.
I almost forgot my name.
Yep. I know. It happens. It's easy to do.
What is wrong with me?
627 times in. It starts to slip away.
Yeah, that's the only time I ever say my name, too. So clearly.
Well, hopefully
that should have been enough repetition.
Hopefully everyone in the States there enjoyed their long weekend, although it's not like it's one of those somber holidays, right? Martin Luther King Jr. Day, so
not around here, man.
Huh.
They party it up.
Oh, okay. Well, it's a day off, so yeah.
Oh yeah. I guess it's sort of like mixed though. You're right. It should be somber, but people are more celebrating the life than remembering the death, I guess.
Yeah.
So then that's great. That's great. I spent it trying to keep my kids occupied.
There you go.
Because they didn't have school.
Yep.
All right. This is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. Get your questions answered. All you have to do is ask. Ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You go to www.avrant.com. Leave us a comment there. Facebook.com/avrantpodcast. YouTube.com/avrant. You can contact us directly. Rob at avrant.com. His Twitter is at FirstReflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter is at avrant_Tom. Yeah, so Punisher's out.
Yeah, second and probably final season.
Not probably. It's
yeah.
I mean,
it's a certainty at this point. Isn't
if they canceled Daredevil after that super strong season 3, they're definitely canceling Punisher. I watched the first four episodes last night, so it was pretty good. I mean, so far I'm enjoying it.
I'm still so far behind. I still haven't finished Jessica Jones, and I'm going in order. So I've got all of them. Jessica Jones, Iron Fist, Daredevil, and Punisher. I got to go through them all.
How are you going to make it through the
and Luke Cage
this first season of Iron Fist? How are you going to make it through that?
I made it through the first season of Iron Fist.
Oh, you already did the first season?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I got the second season.
Second season's better-ish.
Yeah. There you go.
So that was kind of exciting. That was my big AV news.
All right.
All right, let's talk about our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, all you have to do is support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is by going to www.avrant.com, clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link, and leaving us a PayPal donation. PayPal will take money from your PayPal account or from your credit card and give most of it to us, a little cut for themselves. So we want to thank Andre for doing that. Thank you, Andre.
Andre, thank you very much for sending us that donation. We appreciate it.
We also want to thank our 80, first time we broke the big 80. I guess technically we haven't broken it, we've met it, but whatever, close enough. Patrons over at patreon.com. Patreon is a service where you can sign up and they will take a monthly draw from your account and give, again, most of it to us. The minimum is $1 a month, so $12 a year to listen to this podcast, or as much as you want. So we appreciate any and all of our patrons, including Clarence and Mark, who let us know that they were either new or continuing patrons. I don't know which one.
Probably I think one was new and I think one was continuing. So that's just fine. We appreciate all of our patrons over there at patreon.com/avrantpodcast. If you'd like to sign up, thanks so much to our 80 patrons, including Clarence and Mark.
If you cannot support us financially, we totally understand. But if you do something that you feel benefits the podcast, just let us know what you did. Face tattoo.
All right. I mean, it would still be a listener of the week, all right.
You would be a listener of the week. You would probably make the cover. You would be that week's cover, or maybe for a long time, depending on how I felt about it, or anything else. So Mike bought a JVC RS540 projector from AV Science and mentioned us. Bill ordered some Empyrean in-wall speakers, let them know it was our recommendation. Alan shared a pic of his setup with SVS, including his dual PC-2000 subs, and made sure to include a nice plug for AVRant. So thank you, Alan, Bill, and Mike.
Yeah, Alan, was that right? Yeah. No, okay, but going backwards there. I was just following the thing. I had scrolled down so I couldn't see the names, but it's Mike, Bill, and Alan. That's the order that it went, and I was like, I only saw
I reversed on the way back. Just got to keep you on your game.
Mike, Bill, Alan, thanks for the support. We appreciate it. Alan, that's a cool pick. I like that very much.
If you are watching this on YouTube, which is fine, or you can listen to the podcast, like not podcasts are supposed to be. You may be seeing images. If you're not seeing images, then it's because you're watching the unfinished one. Wait a couple of days, and the finished one will come out. It'll be the complete.
It says behind the scenes right in the title, so that is the clue. It is behind the scenes.
If behind the scenes, then you get no images or fewer images. But the image
few.
of
it's such
the
a
image
hassle.
of Alan's theater.
Yeah, you want
that
up there?
No, I don't care. No, make him work for
it.
No, make him work for it.
Yep,
he's just got a cool theater. We haven't seen that theater in a long time, but that's a very cool theater. I do like his theater. And somebody's gonna be like, "Oh, the wall should be black. You shouldn't have that mural up there." And if you're not already curious, you should be curious. The mural is awesome. It's very cool. So I don't know who painted that. I wonder how he got. Anyways, doesn't matter. Maybe it's wallpaper. It doesn't matter. News. In the news. If you're a Netflix subscriber, you're almost certainly already aware that they've announced another price hike is coming in the U.S. Canada's price hikes were already announced months ago. The basic standard definition plan will now be $9, up from $8. HD with 2 screens goes from 11 to 13, and 4K with 4 screens goes from 14 to 16. So, yeah.
Add $1 to that for the Canadian prices on all of those tiers, which actually isn't that bad a deal because that's better than the exchange rate. But there you go.
IMDb launched a free streaming service called FreeDrive. IMDb is owned by Amazon, so FreeDrive is currently only available in the United States and only through a web browser or on a Fire TV device. Ads play on various times throughout a movie or TV show, which is the most annoying thing.
Yeah.
And they have some original content that's exclusive to the service and you're like, oh, well, they play commercials all the time on TV. Yes. Have you ever seen like TNT late at night or something like that? And it's like every third commercial is a Geico commercial.
Right.
That you're like, oh my God,
not
this
commercial. And
with this, it is almost always the same commercial over and over again, every 5 minutes throughout the movie. You're just like, I want to kill myself.
And on TV, they usually at least wait for a scene break, or if it's a TV show, it was specifically made to include commercials. But on the streaming services, it's often just like a set amount of time, so it could be mid-sentence, here comes a commercial. But it's free, so that's what you streamed
one movie from Crackle or Crack.
Could be. Crackle. Could be Crackle. That's a thing.
That's the anime one, right? I think I was trying to watch like Fist of the North Star or something I had on VHS a million years ago, and I was like, oh, I haven't seen this since forever. I want to see that guy's head explode. But I just couldn't, like 3 minutes into it, I was like, I'm out.
The only news to me is that like original content on IMDb's streaming service, like everybody has to have original content. I guess they figured out that's the only way to get people to check it out.
Talk show. That'd be a talk show, right?
Yep.
Feels like that's got a low production value. All right, Carl gave us a heads up that NBCUniversal announced a free ad-supported streaming service that they plan to launch in 2020, also with some exclusive content. Well, I mean, NBCUniversal are they Hulu? They're with Hulu, aren't they?
They're with Hulu, except that now that Disney owns Fox, they own a controlling stake in Hulu, so I guess NBC's probably looking to get away from that. That's probably what's going on. Everybody's going to have their own. It's going to be a hellscape. It's going to be so much worse than cable ever was.
Many TV models with built-in Dolby Atmos playback were announced at CES, but not a single one with built-in DTS-X playback. That's about to change. The first MediaTek chips with DTS-X support for TVs have been announced, although they won't be here until late 2019. They're going to be mandatory for any IMAX enhanced TVs in 2020, though. Come on, guys. Come on.
That's what they're doing.
No one cares. No one cares. No one cares. Well, when you need object-based audio on your TV with its 2 crappy speakers.
But they're doing their whole virtualization thing. That's what they're doing. Panasonic has a TV with actual upward-firing speakers built into the back, which makes it way thicker than anyone wants it to be, but, that's what they did.
Yes, because TVs are universally placed in one location. They're never placed too high above a
fireplace.
A fireplace, or too low on a very low entertainment center. Never. There's never like a 4 to 5 feet difference between one placement and another in any reasonable home.
That's what you're gonna do. Sony's doing it with the sound being made by the TV's panel itself, and yet that's still virtualized Atmos somehow. So
yeah, magic. Some comments here. Nick. A while back, Nick was looking for closed-back headphones with excellent sound quality and all-day wearing comfort. He was very interested in the Shure 1540s after having read some reviews. But at close to $500, we made some other suggestions, including the Sennheiser HD598 CS at about one-third the price. He bought both so that he could condition them for himself. He found that the Shure 1540s had the edge in comfort and were almost like not wearing headphones at all. But they didn't isolate from outside noise very well, and sound quality-wise, he found that their bass a bit boosted and the treble somehow sounding a bit artificial, as though every sound was very separated, but unnaturally so.
Which means it probably has a little bit of a tip right around 4 kilohertz, so a little bit of a smiley face probably.
He found the Sennheisers to a little lighter, a little tighter, occasionally a tiny bit itchy. That happens with those tighter ones. And they happened to rest on his head such that if he wore them literally all day, the very top of his head was a bit sore. That happens to me as well. But they sounded better, and they cost a lot less, so he kept the Sennheisers and sent back the Shures. He found it best to take some breaks anyway, as any closed-back headphones get a bit hot after a while, so he says thanks for all the help. Now he can put the $300 he saved towards other speakers or headphones. Or Patreon. Sorry.
One-time donation, $300.
That's all right. We don't need that. We're fine. Thanks. On a different topic, Nick also noted that Monoprice confirmed that Oro 3D will be added to their $4,000 HTP1 processor that can do 9.1.6 Atmos. Monoprice's product manager also emailed us to confirm this. We got an email from their product manager, or we got a press release?
No, it was an email to us specifically from their product manager. It was clear he had actually listened to the episode where we talked about the HTP1, which I'm still very excited about.
That's cool.
He was like, "Yep, we are confirming it will have Oro 3D now." That was like Audioholics did an interview. And they were like, Oro 3D is possible. We're looking into adding it via firmware. It probably still will be a firmware update, but it's just they're like, yeah, for sure, it'll be a thing that you can do. One other thing Audioholics discovered when they were doing the interview, though, it has Dirac built in, but it is not going to come with a calibrated microphone. So you are going to have to supply your own microphone to do the Dirac thing.
Interesting.
Yep.
So I guess we just have to wait to see if they also add DTS X Pro.
Yeah, because DTS X and Neural X are limited to using 11 speakers, and here you've got a processor that can use 15, so DTS X Pro now lets you use up to 32 speakers theoretically, although, 15 would be the max in this case, plus a sub. So, yeah, but we'll see. If you got enough processing to do, 9.1.6 Atmos and Oro 3D, I'm like, surely there's enough processing to do DTS-X Pro as well. So hopefully that's a firmware update.
All right, George. George wanted to mention that the Russound AB-2.2, which lets you safely connect 2 amplifiers to 1 pair of speakers with a simple button press to switch between the 2 amps for about $75. I had no idea any of these products existed.
That's why the people are letting us know. That's good. That's good to know about. That's a more reasonable price. And
what was the other one? It was like $200, right?
Yeah, I mean, retail it was. You could probably find it for a bit less. But yeah, no, this is more reasonable in price for about $75 on Amazon. And it's just a push button on the front. Do you want A or do you want B? And that makes it
probably
very
just
simple.
Slides a wire over.
It probably. I'm sure you hear a ka-chunk as you press that button.
It's like checking out on an old-timey register. All right, let's get into the questions here. Jonathan, Klipsch and LG made a bit of a splash at CES with their new WiSA-compatible products and eARC, E-A-R-C, enhanced audio return channel.
That's right.
Seems to take aim at making the TV the central hub into which all of your devices are plugged in and sending lossless immersive audio out to an eARC soundbar. Or eARC, or an audio return channel, whatever. But Jonathan wonders if eliminating the AV receiver is actually beneficial. What do we think? Well, you still, no matter what, you have to. Okay, so yeah, is it beneficial? I mean, it is for some people. It's certainly convenient. There's lots of people out there who don't have the room, time, energy, money, or desire to have a full Atmos setup.
Yeah,
most people. I would say the vast majority of people. I know we feel like all we do is talk about Atmos and how to set it up around here, but we are a very niche community of people who are really, really passionate about home theater. Most people are looking for, can I hear it?
Yep.
and can I understand it?
I mean,
and that's pretty much it.
I could see a lot of people going, okay, the built-in speakers are not good enough,
Right.
but it has WiSA built in, so I'm just going to get a pair, just one pair of wireless clip speakers that I can put on either side of the TV on the TV stand. I don't have to connect any wires. It automatically detects that the speakers are there. I just have to plug them into power, and away I go, and I have much better sound quality now. I'm like, that makes a whole lot of sense to me for a whole lot of people. That is certainly more convenient. Yeah, I mean, I think what this probably does more than anything is it will really squeeze the bottom end receivers, right? If you were just going to get a 5.1 receiver, why wouldn't you just get 5 wireless WiSA speakers? That's probably easier for you to set up, although it might actually cost more. But a lot of times when it's about the convenience, you know, or like I say, just a pair or just 3.
It costs more now, but it's not going to necessarily cost more. And you're probably comparing to accessories for less.
That's true too. Yeah.
So, you know, if we think full priced entry level, or most people, I think a lot of people out there are hesitant to buy the bottom of the barrel entry level anything. They always want to bump one level up.
That could be,
you know, so therefore that price even goes a little bit higher.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not against it. I guess that's what it really comes down to. I'm not against it. I don't think receivers and, you know, freestanding speakers are on their way out, not for the foreseeable future. They just...
But I could see it being more... I mean, anybody who wants to do 9.1.6, you're not going to be doing that with WiSA. You're not going to be doing that with a soundbar. But yeah, I could see the bottom end of the receiver market it being really tough to still make that a value choice. But I mean, this is one television brand that's doing it, right?
Well, and soundbars have been out for a long time, and soundbars basically get rid of the receiver most of the time anyway.
That's right.
You know, there were soundbars, and I mean, Samsung had them too, where they had Blu-ray players in them. I mean, they were the source, they were the sound, they were the receiver, they were everything. But we still have entry-level receivers out there. Yeah. So, you know, does this sound the death knell of the entry-level receiver? I don't think so. But it does give people more options. And I mean, I honestly like it. Anything that makes my job easier. Honestly, I mean, and I'm thinking specifically about friends and family. You know,
right.
You know, when they call me up and they say, "What do I need so I can have a 2-channel sound and be able to hear it?" You know, with my TV, I'm like, "Oh, you can do a sound bar, you can do 2 speakers with the receiver, blah blah blah." And you normally, most of the time, I'm just like, "Just get the sound bar."
Yeah.
Just get the sound bar, I mean, because you can plug that in yourself and just don't turn it upside down. You'll be fine.
Here,
even if you do, it doesn't matter.
With the WiSA thing, being able to start with just a pair and then going, you know what, I'd like to try surround sound. You go, you get one more pair, and now you got wireless surrounds. Boom.
Right.
You know, you didn't have to buy anything else or do anything more complicated than add 2 more wireless speakers and plug them into the wall. So I can certainly see benefits there. And yeah, the only thing is, I think, you know, most TVs have at most 4 HDMI inputs. A few of them out there, some Vizios have 5. But, you know, if you've got one of those AV receivers where you got 8 HDMI inputs and you're using all of them, well, you're probably still the person who's going to get an AV receiver anyway.
Yeah,
so.
Most people have, I think, at max 3 sources. I think. The cable box, maybe a Blu-ray player, and a video game.
Yeah, something like that.
You know, that's pretty much it. So maybe a streaming box. All right. Jonathan recently discovered Kanopy.com. They offer free streaming movies as long as your local library is signed up with them. In his case, he can stream 10 movies a month for free just by signing in with his library card. I checked this out in my area, and the only place in my area that has it is USF, which is or UCF. I think it's USF, which is the local college.
Okay.
University of South Florida. I think that's what it is. I don't remember. SPC? It was one of them. Anyways, one of the colleges locally has it. And I don't have access. You got to be a student to get it, but my local library doesn't have it. He watched a movie called First Reformed on the service. It came out in 2018, and at first he thought Kanopy might be limited to really bad SD-only format or something because the movie played in 4:3. And if you don't know what that is, 4:3 is your old TV.
Your old tube TV, squarish looking, yes.
Yeah. But it turns out that's how it was shot in 4:3, and then he found out that this kind of thing is really trendy right now, especially in indie films. Some of the claims that it stands out versus widescreen aspect ratios, and it can lend a sense of nostalgia, and that for movies with a lot of close-up, it focuses all your attention on the actor's face since there's nothing to the sides. Is this just a hipster type thing that is happening, or do we think 4:3 could be making a comeback? Dude, It's such a hipster thing. It's so stupid. That is the.
It's also like I'm used to having shot everything on Instagram where it is a square.
Yeah. Well, I mean, can we all agree that the people who take videos with their phones vertically rather than horizontally should all like have their phones confiscated for like 6 months? Just to, like, make them go to a class. It's just so irritating.
Honestly, a lot of these indie films are like literally being shot on iPhones. That is not uncommon. So
that Tangerine movie was all shot on iPhones, and that was that got a lot of play or a lot of buzz over on like the radio and stuff like that because of how they shot it. But I mean, there's no reason you can't turn your phone to the side. And don't give me this,
we're gonna have a feature film at some point. Like it's gonna be like an indie, but it's gonna be a feature-length film that is shot vertically. It's gonna happen at some point. If it hasn't already, it probably has already happened.
I don't know. If it has, I'm never gonna see it because I'm never gonna watch it. Because I'll go.
Well, it's gonna be meant to be viewed on your phone with your phone vertical in one hand. That's how That's how it's intended to be viewed.
I'm not watching that movie. I'm definitely not watching it on my phone.
Anyway, I would rather not have things shot in 4:3 myself, but whatever.
I mean, this idea of super widescreen, the widescreen format, not 16:9, but
CinemaScope 2.35 to 1,
yeah, that aspect, so that you get this much wider field of view.
Yes, yeah.
A grander scale sort of thing. I mean, I understand what they're saying. Oh, this is, that puts everything a lot more intimate. It makes it more intimate. There's less to distract you. Yeah. And you also basically don't have to spend money on sets and other things because you can't see behind the person's face.
Yep.
So, don't tell me you're making a better experience. You're just trying to save some money and shoot stuff on your phone.
Well, the other side of it is, what's going to happen is if you get a movie that's in 4:3, because old movies and old TV shows that were in 4:3, people put them on their 16:9 televisions, and what do? They put it in stretch mode, don't they? That's that's going to happen. So, yeah.
All right, Christian on Facebook. Christian asks, can you use an NVIDIA Shield with just an external hard drive as both a Plex server and a Plex player, meaning no other device like a computer or a NAS would even be necessary? I believe the answer is yes. I think that's what I said to him.
Yes. I mean, other than if you're backing up your own disks, you'll need a computer and a drive to do the backup process. You can't do the
But that's the
actual
whole deal
backing
with
up on the
NVIDIA,
Shield.
right? All you do is plug a drive into it. It has some storage, doesn't it?
So it's got some built-in internal storage. If you'd like to expand what it uses as its own internal storage, you can plug like a USB thumb drive into it and format it as internal storage. But it has 2 USB ports, and you can also just plug in any USB hard drive as an external drive, and that'll now be accessible directly by the NVIDIA Shield. You can also access it over your network as long as your NVIDIA Shield is connected to the network. You've now turned that USB hard drive into a network-accessible drive by anything else that can look up the NVIDIA Shield. So yeah, other than the backup process, and then the one thing I'll mention is that if you are planning to use your Shield as a Plex server, the actual setting up of the Plex server in other words, like pointing it to where is my content stored, like here are my movies, here are my TV shows, and that you have to do on a web browser, which you'll need some other device, a computer or a tablet or something to do that. You'll log into the Plex web interface, and then up in the upper left-hand corner, there'll be a drop-down menu of all your servers. Well, your NVIDIA Shield will show up there. It'll be your NVIDIA Shield server, and now you'll be able to access that USB drive that was plugged into the Shield. And once you've done that, so once you've done the backups on a computer, you've put them onto the USB hard drive, and you've set up the Plex server using a web browser on some other device, now the Shield and that USB drive can just run completely on its own. Until you want to add more movies, then you'll have to plug the drive into a computer and load up more movies again.
Jay's back with a few more questions regarding his basement home theater build. As a reminder, his goal, is well-muffled sound isolation without overspinning. He's turning an L-shaped basement extension into a dedicated rectangular theater room, and he's already got golden ear in-wall surrounds and backs, in-ceiling Atmos speakers ready to be installed to match his Triton 2 Plus towers, and Super Cinder XXL up front. All right, so he's down to the studs here.
He's down to the studs. It is completely dismantled at the time that he sent the pictures.
Yeah, he hasn't built the door at the back yet, but he's got everything else, it looks like. He's still got an opening back there. All right. He appreciated all of our previous advice, and he went and bought an Outlaw Model 500 amp since the Emotiva A5175 we suggested is out of stock right now. He also loved that no one else has made the whole air return situation as easy to understand as we did, so he says we've been a great help. You're welcome. On the topic of muffled again, last time we talked a bit about Tom's theater. Just for reference, before Tom constructed his new wall and door, could people... Okay, this is a huge paragraph about my theater, but I didn't set up my theater until I moved my wall.
Okay.
So I don't have a before.
Ah, okay.
Okay, before it would... Okay, I'll tell you though, before it would have been a lot louder because basically the wall was... there was a bookshelves and an entertainment center built into the wall. Okay, and it was basically just behind the entertainment center and the bookshelves was like a couple of layers of drywall, if that, just some framing, drywalls, nothing else, and it was very, very thin, so it would have been real bad. Okay, his former it's just regular. Okay, wait. So, do I have to read anything else of that? So he wants to get the level of regular volume dialogue can't really be heard at all outside the theater, and only the loudest stuff can be heard. Do we think our recommendations from last time will achieve that? Well, it depends kind of what you think regular volume is. Yeah. Like my regular volume is louder than, many regular volumes. I think yes. And I guess it depends on how far away from that door you're going to be too.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit tricky because like he was saying, so last time I described it, I said that his basement was completely open to the rest of the house. He's like, well, actually there are some French doors that separated the basement from the upstairs. So he's like, even with those French doors closed, and before, like it's torn down to the studs now, but the basement used to be finished. But it was just finished with a single layer of half-inch drywall. There was no closing between the theater area and the rest of the basement. There were just the French doors that closed it off from upstairs. And, there was no insulation. It was just half-inch drywall. And he's like, yeah, just playing movies down there like that, you could hear just normal dialogue upstairs. You might not be able to totally make out what they're saying, but you could hear just normal dialogue. And then anything louder than that was like plainly audible upstairs. Right. So he definitely wants it much more muffled. He wants it at the point where the regular dialogue you basically don't hear at all, and the loudest parts you're like, okay, something is playing, but I can't really understand it. That's what
from upstairs. I believe that you should be able to achieve what you're talking about by following our instructions.
We were saying
my regular volume, and I mean I'm not upstairs or anything. I mean I'm 10 feet away, 12 feet away in another room, but there's only the one door separating us. I can't hear most of it.
Yeah.
And I almost never can make out what people are saying. I can hear the explosions.
Sure.
When
you're like, something made a noise there. No, I mean, you had three major things working against you previously, which was that one, you had an air return that was shared by the whole house, and we're going to be taking care of that, and that's huge. Second, you had a thin ceiling with no insulation above it, and we're going to be taking care of that. Now it's going to be an insulated ceiling with double drywall. That's, more or less what we settled on for ceiling. That's going to be huge. And you are putting in a wall and a well-constructed door to close off the theater room from the rest of the basement. So now any sound would have to get through that wall and that door into the rest of the basement and through the French doors to get upstairs that way. So those are three major paths that we've addressed. I really think that, we were saying last time, the exterior walls, you can just do a single layer of drywall. The new party walls, make those double drywall. The ceiling, make that double drywall. That should take care of it. Closing off the air return is huge.
Yeah.
So I really think you're going to be in good stead there.
She says, so will using sound clips and hat channels with 2 layers of drywall on the ceiling lower the ceiling height too much to make Atmos worthwhile? Before they took the basement down to studs, there was just a single layer of half-inch drywall on the ceiling and laminate flooring with a minimal underlay on over the cement floor, and that was exactly 8 feet. So what sort of ceiling height would we be looking at after soundproofing? Well, I mean, you've got double drywall, right, is what you're talking about. Is that what we talked about?
All along he's been talking about using double 5/8, and that isn't really necessary. It doesn't have to be double 5/8. You can do double half-inch.
So that's an inch with a little bit extra because of the green glue.
Very minimal extra. Yeah. And then the hat clips and the sound clips and the hat channels, that's 2 3/4 inches is what it should be. Should be between 2.5 and 3 inches is what that should add. So you should be looking at 3 3/4 inches that you've lost in the ceiling. maybe 4 at a maximum. Just call it 4 to round it off. And then if you do a little something like normally in a basement, what I like to do is see that dimpled. I guess it's sort of like a plastic material, but it's that dimpled rubberized plastic layer directly over the cement, and then a layer of like plywood subfloor, and then your finished flooring. So you're probably losing between a 1/2 inch and an inch there. So in total, I would say you're losing less than 6 inches of height, 6 inches of height maximum. So you'd be at 7.5 feet at the worst, which is fine. A 7.5 foot ceiling is fine.
Yeah. I mean, and as far as for Atmos, all it does is slightly change the angles. I mean, it doesn't change the angles. The angles are the same. It's just that it hits the wall a little bit sooner.
Right.
So instead of having the
instead
speakers
of exactly
5 feet,
yeah, 4.5
exactly 5 feet in front of you, and 5 feet behind you, you go 4.5 and 4.5, and you're good to go. So his installer said installing backer boxes for the in-wall and in-ceiling speakers is no problem, but he says he can make them out of 3/4 inch plywood. Jay is used to making any car audio enclosures out of MDF. Should he insist upon MDF for the backer boxes, or is plywood fine? So I don't know how I got on this, but I got on some website and I ended up on a forum, and they were talking about speaker design, building a speaker box.
Sure.
And they were talking about what materials to use, and somebody was suggested plywood, and the only thing they said is that make sure it's like gapless plywood, or it doesn't have air holes in it somehow. I've never
seen plywood do that.
I've never seen or heard of that before, but that's what they said. I have no. I mean,
I guess if you got like 1/8 inch thick oriented strand board, maybe something could be bad about that, but
I don't know. The 3/4 inch plywood seems almost overkill.
Yeah.
You could do a 1/2 inch and be just fine, but if he wants to use 3/4, maybe that's what he'll be using on other things, and they'll just be around.
Sure. It's probably what he's using for the subfloor, right? So he's probably got a pile of it. No, honestly, there's no reason to insist upon MDF for this. All we're trying to do is make sure that you're building this quite soundproof ceiling. You're going to some extent there. And then you're making a big old hole in it to put lights or a speaker into it. We want to make sure that you have now basically built a, more ceiling that wraps around the big hole that you punch. That's all we're trying to do. So, I mean, whether it's oriented strand board or plywood or MDF or whatever, that makes exceedingly little difference. The point is just to seal it up so that the air can't freely move anymore. And plywood is totally fine.
So Jay has seen some of the impressive-looking equipment racks in other people's theaters. He isn't going to have that. So is he missing out on something? Sometimes people have multiple huge amplifiers, crazy-looking power conditioners, all sorts of external DACs and EQs. He's just going to have his Marantz receiver and a new Outlaw amp. Is this setup inadequate?
You have so much 100%. More than the average person.
Damn it, Rob.
I'm sorry, I stepped up.
It's completely inadequate. You should feel terrible about yourself and go spend $700,000 on some Theo monoblock amplifiers.
Right.
No, man. Okay, the reality is 99.999% of the systems that you see out there with all that gear in it need none of it.
Yeah.
They would be better off overall had they just bought your Marantz and your Outlaw amp. They would have been better off overall, and more reasonable speakers more than likely. Most of the time, these things are not even really all that meant to be used. It's like art installation in their house. They just do it.
My neighbor got such and such. I have to one up them. It's a lot of that.
Right. It's a lot of that. So I mean, we on this podcast believe that you should get 100% the best sound and video that you can afford in your price range, whatever that might be. And we're going to help you get there. At the same time, we can't stop you, but we're going to only make recommendations that are appropriate for your room. So if you had a room that was so big that it demanded, or you had speakers that were so hard to drive that it demanded huge amps,
right,
we would say so.
Yep.
But that's not where you are.
Definitely not.
Yeah. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
I mean, you can have amplifier envy. We all do. I mean, I do. I look at this stuff and go, man, I would love to have a big old amp like that.
Sure, yeah. I get that.
Sure. If somebody wants to give it to me, I will put it in my room. I will not even hook it up to anything. I'll just let it sit there and, Class A heat my room during the winter. But
Honestly, the Marantz you're getting by itself is way more than the average person ever gets, and then now you're adding an outlaw amp to it as well. No, sir.
You've got speakers in your ceiling. You have a dedicated room. You've got
two subwoofers.
Two subwoofers, man. You're so far above the curve. You will be lucky if you walk into one house your entire life that has a better setup or a bigger setup than you have. They may have something comparable, but very unlikely to have something better or significantly larger. I've been in the houses of CEOs, and I've gone into their home theaters and gone, man, my stuff crushes all this.
And sometimes they paid a whole lot more than Tom paid.
Oh
for
yeah.
Stuff. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Hey, I've got 7.1, and 5 of those are in the ceiling.
Mm-hmm. Or all of them.
4 of them are in the ceiling usually. All the surrounds and the surround backs. All right, Chris. Chris says, so LG OLED TVs have a dynamic tone mapping, and Sony Master Series OLEDs, I gotta stop saying that, OLEDs do too. Chris loves the idea. Ignore the HDR10 metadata and just analyze the video signal frame by frame inside the TV itself. Heck, that might even be better than dynamic metadata in Dolby Vision or HDR10+. So is there some external device or an Ultra HD Blu-ray player that can do that? It's something that could be offered in the future. Okay, so this idea here of having your device analyze frame by frame and then tonally mapping everything is something that I think is sort of not necessary, but nice to have now, because it's a brand new technology, and the mastering is not really, I don't think, uniform from different sources, different people, from different studios, different movies.
Yeah, there's lots of discs that we've seen where they analyze the metadata and they just zeroed out all the metadata values, which was clearly not what was meant. That's not what the metadata was supposed to be. It was just a bunch of zeros.
Right. So I think that having devices right now that can do that can be beneficial. But I think in the long run, it's going to be like, well, I'd much rather have my TV decode Dolby Atmos than send PCM back to my receiver. Well, that made sense for like when it first came out, because not all the receivers could do Dolby, not Atmos, but Dolby surround or digital or whatever. Remember when the not TVs, but the sources, we were connecting everything for Blu-rays and HD DVDs via PCM, via RCA cables, because the receivers weren't able to do it. So do I think that, I think in the end you're going to want to be able to decode the Dolby Vision or HDR10+ or whatever it is, and that is going to be fine. But for right now, having TVs that can do it, I think, can help alleviate some of the mastering issues we're having.
Yeah, I don't know. I am 100% in favor of the displays just doing it, because processing power is only going up. We've got lots of examples where the metadata wasn't correct. Dolby Vision is supposed to be like an end-to-end system where, Dolby's involved in every step of the process, and even then we've got some TVs that still don't look correct, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's stuck in that mode, and that's the way it's going to look. So honestly, I would rather just see all HDR just be PQ10, which is, the underlying electro-optical transfer function of HDR10 without any metadata attached to it. Just like, that's it. As far as the TV's concerned, it could be anywhere between 0 and 10,000 nits, but I'm just going to look at it frame by frame and show it to you properly. I'm honestly in favor of that. But to answer his question directly, are there any external devices or Ultra HD Blu-ray players that do that right now? No, not at the moment. The closest is like Panasonic's UB820, but what that is doing is it's looking at the metadata and then applying different tone curves based on the metadata. But of course, if the metadata is wrong, that's not the same thing. It's not actually analyzing the image itself. Is it something that a source, or an external device, a Blu-ray player, could do itself in the future? Obviously, technically it's possible, but
it has to know what your TV can do.
It would, which you would have to either do by a manual setting, or now the TV would have to start feeding information in its EDID, its extended display information. It would have to start feeding that back, which is actually the proposal that the high definition gaming consortium wants. That's what they want the TV to tell the gaming system what it's capable of, so the game can on the fly render the HDR in a manner that the TV can show properly. So I mean, it's still all being developed. So could a player do it in the future? Yeah, technically it's entirely possible. Whether or not that's the way things are actually going to play out, like I say, I mean, if the game system just sends out anywhere between 0 and 10,000 nits, have at it, and the TV is going to be able to analyze that frame by frame and show it to you properly, so it still maintains all the detail no matter what. I'm in favor of that. I think that's the simplest way to do it. Simplify what's being sent, and now that it's up to the display to do it. That's what I like.
Yeah. We'll see.
We'll see.
Brian. I always want to say brain. Brian has made a bunch of recent upgrades. An old Sharp Aquos to a 70-inch 2018 Vizio M series, a Yamaha RX V665 receiver to a Denon X3400H, an old Blu-ray player to a Sony X700 Ultra HD Blu-ray player, and an old Apple TV to an Apple TV 4K.
He made some 4K upgrades, didn't he?
He sure did. Which one do you think's giving him the problem? Put your votes in now. Post them in the comments of www.avrant.com.
I was going to make that joke, but no. Why does everybody do that on the post in the comments what you think? It's like they're watching a video.
Smash that like button, baby. Yeah. Smash it. No, I don't.
Hey, guys.
If you want me to be successful and to make more videos, you have to hit the like button, okay?
Not just the like button, you have to hit the bell.
Hit the little bell so you can always hear our sexy voices.
I hate it so much.
And you know the sad part is that YouTube is no longer profitable for
anybody.
Content. Oh, we got our first content ID strike. It wasn't a strike.
Really?
It was a content ID. Yes, we have some video on our website, on our YouTube page, which is somebody had like the old style like equalizer where the little bars go up and down as the music goes through, so you can see what frequencies are being used. Yeah. And whatever music they use. Yep. I was like, I got the content ID strike during dinner. I was like, what? So I went to go check it out.
That's old now, too. That's going back. It's got to be more than a year.
Way old. I'm like, how did we get noticed? The algorithm had to dig deep for us. So they're like, so I'm like, what do I have to do? Do I have to refute it or whatever? And they're like, well, if it's not really your music, if it is your music, refute it. But if it's not your music, just leave it alone. And whoever's music it is, they'll get all your ad revenue. I'm like, good luck with that.
Yeah. Enjoy your negative 20 cents.
Boy, don't buy another car. All right, so back to our friend here with the new TV, receiver, Blu-ray player, and Apple 4K TV. Which one gave him the problem? The Apple TV 4K gave him some issues. Almost as soon as you boot it up for the first time, if your TV can do Dolby Vision, it asks you if you want to try using Dolby Vision. So, of course, he said yes, because he's a reasonable person who would want to say yes to a question that was reasonably asked.
I just got a new TV. I specifically got it because it has Dolby Vision. Hey, you got a TV that has Dolby Vision. You want to try it? Yeah. Yep. Seems reasonable.
But then he got some flashing white lines. Some folks online in Apple's own help section, which is less helpful than most sections, said to try the $30 Belkin 48 gigabits per second HDMI cable that Apple sells. I'm sure it had a helpful affiliate link with it too. So he got that, but it didn't fix the issue. Shucks. But at least you have a $30 cable now. He fiddled with the I pressed the button. He fiddled with the video settings and got the flashing white lines to go away by turning off Enable Dolby Vision and setting the format to 4K HDR, the chroma to 4.2.2 or 422
colon 2 colon
yes. The colons, yeah. Double dots, and setting the match content setting to match dynamic range on, match frame rate off. He also made sure his Vizio TV was set to full UHD color on. Are those the correct settings to optimize his image?
Very nearly.
I'm looking at it, and first of all, I don't have either of these devices. I don't do 4K, so I'm way out of the loop. I'm looking at this, and I think the thing that helped the most was probably setting the chroma to 422, but I might be wrong about that. So it seems like you should be able to enable Dolby Vision with the rest of the stuff.
Well, so here's the way the Apple TV 4K goes, and it's completely unintuitive. So
of course it is.
In that format section, so the very top thing will say enable Dolby Vision, yes or no. And then right below that is the format. Now, this is explained nowhere, so you do have to ask somebody like us who supposedly knows. But what you actually want to, what the format is think of it as what is the lowest thing I ever want to send it? What do I want the menus to look like? That's basically what you're setting here. Because what the Apple TV 4K does is if you set it the format to 4K HDR or you set it to enable Dolby Vision, it does the thing where everything is output as that. Regardless of how the source content actually came in, it's like the format is 4K HDR. Well, now your TV is going to be in HDR mode all the time. Doesn't matter what the original source content was. So the format you actually want to set to, I mean, I would probably leave it at 4K as, you know, instead of bumping it down to 1080p, which you could theoretically do, but the scaling is not ever usually the problem.
Right.
So I would leave the format at 4K SDR. Because now all the content and I mean, I hate navigating menus in HDR because they're blinding. So now your menus and content that is standard dynamic range will actually come out of the thing in standard dynamic range. And everything is going to be upscaled to 4K, but that's fine. Now you had that match dynamic range thing turned on. If the content is HDR, it'll match that. It'll play in HDR. If the content is Dolby Vision, it'll match that. It'll play in Dolby Vision. But when the content is SDR, it'll go back down to SDR because you set your format as SDR. The chroma is that thing. You have your choice, 420, 422, 444. The content is all 420. Oh. So honestly, if you want to just have the Apple TV spit out what the actual content is.
And that should save you quite a bit of bandwidth, shouldn't it?
That'll save you bandwidth, yes.
Yeah.
So, but 422 is also fine. 444 often causes problems. So that's probably what it was set to originally. Now, in his specific case, normally I'm in favor of turning on the match the frame rate, but the Vizio M series were 60 hertz panels. They weren't 120 hertz panels. So if you were watching stuff that was in 24 frames per second, it actually did have a 48 hertz mode, but you got a little bit of flicker because that's a pretty low frame rate. So honestly, leaving it the way you have it probably is best. You probably noticed some flicker with it on, and it looks better with it off. So that makes a lot of sense with the Vizio M series. So yeah, the only thing you need to change is changing the format to 4K SDR, and now your menus and everything that is SDR will play in SDR instead of everything being forced into HDR.
So he asked, what about the audio settings? Says, how does he make sure he's getting the best audio possible with his 5.2.2 Atmos setup? Is there a bit stream out on this thing, or is it not? Is it stupid?
Now, thankfully, on the audio, they're actually like amazingly clear because the way the Apple TV...
Different engineer on the audio menus.
It really was, yeah. The way the audio in the Apple TV 4K works is it actually decodes everything inside of itself. The exception being Atmos. They made a special exception for Atmos. That gets output as an Atmos bitstream because it has to be. But everything else, if it's stereo, if it's 5.1, if it's Dolby Digital plus 7.1, all of that gets decoded inside of the Apple TV 4K and output as PCM audio. So you have to be aware, everything other than Atmos is going to show up on your AV receiver as multi-channel PCM. That is what the Apple TV is putting out, but you're getting full quality. The setting is just going to say auto/Atmos. And if you try to change it, it actually brings up a warning that says, if you change this, you won't get Atmos anymore. It's really, really clear in its warning. So it's kind of obvious to just leave it at auto/Atmos. That's what the audio setting will be.
A lot of people get very, very concerned when the front of the receiver does not say the thing that they know they're supposed to be hearing.
Fair
or
enough,
seeing.
too.
So when you see that PCM, most of the time, not always, but most of the time that is a good thing, you know, or it'll get like multi-channel in or something like that, where, and you'll see, like on my Denon, you'll see all the channels that are coming in, and then it'll show you right next to it all the channels that are being used, that are outputting. So, you know, that'll tell you what what's coming in, and then what it is turning it into in order to put it out. And you should be seeing all your speakers in use. Yeah, and because
unlike the Xbox One, when the source is stereo, it outputs stereo. When the source is 5.1, it outputs 5.1.
How can we not fix that on the Xbox? How can we not fix that on the Xbox? It's a freaking computer.
Yup.
It is not hard.
Shouldn't be.
How have they not fixed it yet?
Because
it's been years.
Nobody in their own Microsoft house has noticed or cared about it. That's the only way these things happen.
Just that level of incompetence is just mind-boggling. Boshko. Did we do everything? Yeah. Yep. Okay. Boshko, who I believe is in witness protection for being a police informant, because Boshko sounds like the name of somebody who's a police informant. Is using an Onkyo RZ810 receiver. It says it can do Atmos, but he did not install any overhead or upward firing speakers. He just set up a traditional 7.1 speaker layout. But when he plays a Blu-ray with Atmos soundtrack, it says Atmos on the front panel. So is it really playing Atmos even though it doesn't have Atmos speaker? And how does it compare to regular 7.1 True HD or DTS HD master audio playback? Any actual difference? All right, so a 7.1 setup, the surround back speakers are considered Atmos speakers.
Yes, 7.1 is a authorized Atmos configuration. No overhead speakers, no upward firing speakers, just your traditional 7.1 that is considered an Atmos configuration.
So the difference between an Atmos soundtrack in theory and a DTS HD, master audio or True HD Dolby track is that in the regular 7.1 tracks, they are discrete channels. Which means a sound was put in each of those speakers individually, mixed in by a mixer person who did that sort of thing. That's right. Atmos is supposed to be object-based, which means they placed the object within a 3D space within your theater, and then the speakers are to recreate that based on which speakers you have in your in your receiver as far as your setup. They're like, oh, it's supposed to be the front of the room, but high.
Sure.
Okay, well then we'll use what speakers can we use to make that happen? Oh, it's supposed to be at the back of the room but low. Okay, what speakers can we use to make that happen? That's the way it should be. Especially with some of the earlier mixes, it seems like they still mix 7.1 discrete, and then they just kind of also did the same sort of thing with
they pretty much picked 4 overhead locations, and that's the only places the sounds ever come from.
As
though they were channels. Yep.
So in theory, the difference should be in the mixing and how they place the sounds in the space. Your subjective experience may be that they sound essentially identical, and it could be because either the Atmos is mixed identically, or they basically did discrete channels when they did the Atmos mix.
Yeah, I mean, Atmos soundtracks can still use channels. It's not as though everything has to be mixed as objects. So it's entirely up to the people who made the soundtrack how they decide to program the soundtrack. But since you have a 7.1 configuration, and yes, your Onkyo saying Atmos on the front panel is entirely what it should say, if there are audio objects being used in that soundtrack, theoretically, you could get a little bit more precise, movement of that sound around you, or it might seem to emanate from a slightly different location than it would have been in a, strictly channel-based mix. But in reality, you're probably going to have an awfully difficult time telling whether it was Atmos objects or Dolby True HD in 7.1. So realistically, you're probably not going to notice a difference. But yeah, you technically, if there are objects, your system can play them back as objects.
All right. What is the highest quality audio he can stream from his iPhone X to his Onkyo RZ89?
Someone's going to get so mad you call it an X.
Is it supposed to be 10?
Yeah, that's what it said.
Well, they should have wrote 10.
I know. But
they wrote 8.
Mac OS.
They didn't do Roman numeral, VIII. They didn't do that.
Mac OS 10, not X, right? That's been the thing. They called it the iPhone XS. How are you not supposed to call that XS? Because it is XS.
It's extra small. I mean, that's what it is.
Anyway, 10, whatever.
So what's the highest quality audio he can stream to his receiver via AirPlay? He's read that AirPlay is limited at 44.1 kilohertz, 16-bit. But his Onkyo says it's capable of playing back music much higher sampling and bit rate. So is the AirPlay limiting the quality of his music? I don't remember because it's been a while since I've looked this up, but it used to be that not only did it not, okay, it outputs 4416, but the streaming wasn't always 4416 if I or the transfer wasn't always 4416. So I don't remember. I'll be honest with you, I don't remember.
Well, I mean,
I remember it being I remember it being a nightmare. People complaining about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, AirPlay takes whatever format is playable by the player that is originally handling the audio. It'll convert that into Apple lossless ALAC. Right. It'll convert it into the Apple lossless codec at 44.1 kilohertz, 16-bit sampling. That is what it'll do. So that's what's being sent over the AirPlay connection. And as far as what your receiver is receiving, it's getting 44.1 16-bit Apple lossless. That's what it sees as the source coming in, regardless of what the original music file was. Now, is that limiting the quality of the music? Well, I mean, this is a whole huge debate.
What are you streaming it from? You're streaming it from the actual device, and what was it encoded in?
Yeah.
Or are you streaming it from Pandora, in which case it's like 96, 92.
Kilobit MP3.
all the snare drums sound like tink, tink.
Right. But my answer is this. 44.1 kilohertz sampling at 16-bit is entirely capable of sending all the information the human ear can withstand. All right?
And decode at least. Yeah.
Yes. And as long as... so let's say you had some 192 kilobit, 32-bit piece of music that you're attempting to play. And you're like, oh, I'm losing all these bits. I'm losing all this information. Well, as long as all of the ultrasonic frequencies that you cannot possibly hear are properly filtered off, 44.1 kilohertz sampling is totally fine. It'll only make errors if it's trying to encode frequencies higher than 22.05 kilohertz. It can't encode those properly, so which means they do need to be filtered off. But as long as it's properly filtered off, it's perfect. 16-bit can encompass 96 decibels of dynamic range, and believe me, there is no music even at 24-bit or 36-bit that is actually using 96 decibels of dynamic range.
When we think about this whole, how many bits, what the frequency range is, the music that you can hear, let's as a metaphor, it's a sandwich. Just think of a foot-long Subway sandwich, right? That is all the music that you can hear, all of it.
Okay.
You can't hear anything on the left side of that sandwich. You can't hear anything on the right side of the sandwich. All you can hear is the sandwich.
Okay.
Right? Now, if you take that sandwich and you wrap it up into a container, just like wrap it up like they do at Subway, and you hand it to somebody, you've handed them all the music they can hear. Now, if you take that and you put it into a bag that's a big grocery bag, and you hand it to them, they've still gotten all the music that they can hear, but now they have a bunch of air around it that they cannot hear.
Yeah, no, put it in one of those giant pails that you mix cement in.
Yeah,
it's a big old container, but it's still the same sandwich. Yes, agreed.
Yes, that's exactly what we're talking about here, and I'm hoping this metaphor gets through because people keep looking at these numbers like it's bigger, it must be better. No, you can still only eat the sandwich. No matter how big of a bag it is.
We're not disputing that it's a bigger container.
Yes.
And if you're recording the sound, grabbing things with a bigger container so that you can distill it down to the sandwich later is not a bad idea at all. We're all in favor of that. Instead of
if you think about
only trying to capture the sandwich when you're recording it. Yes.
The sandwich buffet line that they put the sandwich together in, they have a huge containers of all of these different things,
all the ingredients.
That thing is huge. But when they give it to you, they wrap it up into their little container, which is the wrapper, and they hand it to you because now they put everything that you need into one thing, and they've given it to you. Putting it in a bigger bag does not make it a better sandwich.
Yes.
It just makes it a bigger bag.
MP3 is a case of the container is not big enough to hold the original sandwich.
Right.
We had to cut off a little bit of the sandwich to put it into a smaller container. That's MP3. That's different. You have actually lost something now.
Right. That's what my wife does when she gets a sandwich. She takes and she opens the bread. She scrapes out as much of the inside of the bread as she can because she's trying to save calories.
Okay.
And then she closes it. Yep. Now, it still looks like the same sandwich, but there's stuff missing from the inside.
Okay, yeah, there you go.
All right?
Yep.
Now, you're still going to taste bread. You're still going to taste it. You're still going to have bread in your mouth.
You're still going to recognize it as a sandwich.
As a sandwich, but it's not going to be as
missing.
filling, and a little bit of it is missing. You may not notice it, or
Yes.
you may, depending on how much bread you scrape out of that thing.
But what we're saying is the Apple lossless at 44.1 kilohertz, 16-bit, is a big enough container to hold the entire sandwich. So
we are so answering his next question.
Have you lost any of the quality of the music? No. I know that's going to be debated, but the answer is no, you have not lost
Objectively, you have not.
That's right.
And if you debate that, you're going to be debating us on subjective experiences and hearsay.
And this next part that we're going to get into is something I entirely understand. So
Yes. So he recently discovered high-res music download sites like 2L, AIX, or AX?
it's AIX. Yes.
Whatever. Chesky, MA recordings, and reference recordings. They mostly offer 9624 FLAC files. FLAC is another lossless format like
the
ALC.
Free lossless audio codec,
Yeah, which is what we use to pass our podcast back, our different halves of the podcast back and forth to each other. He sends his half of the podcast to me in a FLAC file. Why? Because it's lossless, but it's compressed. Because we used to send WAV files, and that took all night because WAV files are completely uncompressed.
FLAC is a magical sandwich bag that somehow squishes the size of the sandwich down when I pass it over to Tom, but then when Tom gets it, it inflates back up to the full sandwich without having lost anything. So that is lossless compression.
Right. So they genuinely do sound amazing, he says, mostly free from dynamic range compression or tons of obvious processing. So why do we say high-res audio isn't necessary and that CD quality is all we really need? Well, we've already answered that, but we're going to answer your actual question in a second. These recordings clearly sound better. Isn't that all there is to it? No.
The key question is why?
Yeah.
Yes.
Taking a terrible sandwich and putting it in a big bag will not make the sandwich taste better.
There you go.
Okay? But if you know that the people that are going to taste that sandwich are people that are discerning sandwich tasters, man, this metaphor is just going way off the rails. Then you're going to put your best foot forward on that sandwich. You're going to be making the best sandwich you can. And that's what's happening here. These guys are recording high-res music, and they know the people that are buying it are looking for well-recorded and well-mixed music. Therefore, they care about the sound quality. Now, you can actually go out and very easily with a Google search find interviews with sound designers, sound engineers, recording engineers, mixers that will talk about how they have interacted with bands. The band has come in saying we want to record a great sounding album, blah 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 blah. We're very sound quality is very important to us. Everything else, they get in there, record everything, and then the band listens to it back, and the band says, "How come this other album is louder than ours?"
Make it louder.
They're like, okay, well, I mean, we can make it louder, but you're going to lose some of your sound. Your dynamic range. Yeah, but theirs is louder. Okay, well, that's how this stuff happens. I mean, that's part of it. There's probably some sound designers and engineers out there that have only been trained on how to do it, how to record and compress and dynamic range compression and everything else, and they think that sounds good, and therefore that's what they do, and people go to them for that reason. And there's some people who actually care, who are like, well, I mean, you're paying me, so I will do it however you want, but honestly, you're screwing up the record here by doing it this way. So that's what's happening.
The question here is, do these recordings sound better because we put them into a big, huge container, or do they sound better because we made a better recording and we actually could put it into a smaller container, a container that's just large enough to hold it? It would still sound exactly the same. That is actually what's going on. They made a better recording, and they happen to put it into a container that's bigger than it needs to be. Now, that doesn't harm anything. There's no harm. But,
it does make you feel superior to people who that do not have such large bags. You walk around with your big bag, go, look at my bag, your bag's small. It's the same thing inside each bag.
And it's a little bit of this. So the thing is, if you go in general, when I buy 9624 files, they end up sounding better. And I'm like, that is probably true. That is correlation, not causation.
Exactly.
Right?
Oh my God. Statistics 101. Yes.
And I mean, it's entirely true that if they're releasing a 9624 version, they probably spent more time making the recording sound good.
And that's what we call, a confounding factor. Or,
Yes.
in this case, it's a type of bias.
Yeah.
The bias here is you're making this relation between the size of the container and the sound quality, but
Right.
really the confounding factor here is that the recording engineer is making different choices because they know what size container they're going to put it in and who you are.
So
basically.
The easiest way to think of it is you could buy a 9624 FLAC recording. That sounds awful. That is entirely possible to do. And there are, in fact, plenty of them out there. So it is not... It's not the format. It's not the number of bits that make it sound better. That's just a container that happens to be holding something that sounds good or sounds bad. And we can hold everything that the human ear can hear in a 44.1 kilohertz 16-bit container. It's just big enough, but it's just big enough.
Yeah. A lot of people, I mean, one of the complaints you'll see from people online is they'll be asking, oh, is this an actual 9624 recording or is the 4416 that's been upsampled to it? And the answer is, it doesn't matter. But because it's the same music.
What they're really asking is this going to sound better than the Redbook CD release where they dynamic range compressed it to hell? And the answer is, we don't know unless it's a different master.
Yeah, that's right. And if you think that, go back to the Metallica Rock Band controversy of not so long ago, when Rock Band was a thing. They released their Rock Band album, which had not released, but the tracks on the Rock Band had way more dynamic range.
In the video game, yes.
In the game than their actual CD did.
That's right.
I mean, you're telling me that it's because the video game is recorded at higher bit rate?
Was actually lossy. It had lost data, but it still sounded way better because the master was different.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example there. All right. Thomas, or W. Thomas, or whatever, is looking for a 4K HDR projector recommendation. He says our previous recommendation led him to getting a BenQ HT2050 with a 110-inch silver ticket screen. He also got a Marantz SR6011 receiver and positioned his surround speakers and his subwoofers all on our device. So you're welcome, sir. His current distance from lens to screen is 9 feet 8 inches, which means that even with the BenQ's 2050 relatively short throw distance, it is zoomed in a ways in order to fill the entire 110-inch screen. Moving his projector ceiling mount would be difficult because of obstacles in his ceiling behind the location, so we greatly prefer to keep it where it is. He wants to experience HDR. That's the main reason he wants to upgrade. So which HDR projector would we recommend at the $1,500 price point? And what's a different projector we recommend at a $2,500 price point? I don't know.
Okay, so there's some stuff to get into. First of all,
can we talk about sandwiches again? Let's talk about sandwiches.
You're right. Yeah, that was fun. So this is going to be really squeaky here. If you must keep it at 9 feet 8 inches and there is no other alternative, there's really only one projector and its sort of alternate version at the $1,500 price point, which is Optoma's UHD50. That is one of the projectors where the panel itself is actually 1080p, but they use that panel 4 times per frame. They wiggle it around and use it 4 times per frame to give you 4K resolution, and you actually are getting all 8 million pixels that way. It is compatible with HDR, and if you zoom it in all the way, you should be able to just fill a 110-inch image with the lens 9 feet 8 inches away.
So are you really 9 feet 8 inches, or are you 9 feet 7.5?
Yeah,
because it might make a difference in this case.
Now, there is an alternate version, which is the UHD51A, which is a little bit more expensive. It's $1,700 and adds a couple of things, including 3D, which you probably don't care about, frame interpolation, which is the horrid soap opera effect, so we probably don't care about, and you can talk to it using She Who Shall Not Be Named. So it's not a huge reason to get the 51A, in my opinion, but hey, it's there. So those are kind of the only ones, because everything else I might possibly recommend at either of these price points requires the lens of the projector to be farther away than 9 feet 8 inches to fill a 110-inch screen.
So you can get the $1,400 one, or the $1,700 one that has a bunch of stuff you probably don't want.
Right. So, I mean, now there is the Epson 4000, which looks better in every conceivable way, has a whole bunch of nice features, including motorized zoom and lens and all that, and it is down to $1,500 now. There is a newer version, which is the 4010. This is the 4000 from a couple of years ago, but very little difference between those two. But the closest it can possibly be to a 110-inch screen is 10 feet 9 inches from its lens to the screen. But it has a huge zoom range where it can be as far away as 22 feet 8 inches. And I'm thinking, okay, there's nowhere else you can put this projector on your ceiling, but could you put it on a shelf on your back wall? Because that zoom range is probably long enough that
he's already got a hole in the ceiling. Who knows?
At the back of your... Well, all we're talking about is taking down the existing projector and now putting a projector on your back wall. I'm saying this because Epson is also going to be my pick for the $2,500 price point. Now, right now, the 5040 UB from last year is on discount down to $2,100, which I'm crossing my fingers means the 5050 UB should be here very, very soon. The big difference there is that the 5040 UB and the Epson 4000 at $1,500, if you're watching 4K with high dynamic range, they are limited to 24 frames per second. Now, if all you watch is movies, that's no problem at all. But if you play video games on an Xbox One X, you're going to want to be able to do 4K HDR at 60 frames per second. The Epson 4000 and the Epson 5040 UB cannot do that. The forthcoming 5050 UB, which I don't know where it is, but hopefully this means it's coming soon, that one will be able to do 4K HDR at 60 frames per second. That's going to be my pick. It's probably going to be about $2,700 when it first comes out, but that's going to be my pick there. Optima has some slightly upgraded projectors at $1,800 or at $2,300.
Right.
But those, the closest they can be is 11 feet 1 inch, and the farthest they can be is 17 feet 9 inches. So that might not work for even a rear shelf mount, depending on how long your room is. Whereas the Epsons probably could go on a rear shelf. So yeah,
I wonder if his projector is in front of a fan or something like that. You just want to go behind the fan.
Yeah,
which could be the case.
Yeah, it could be. But yeah, those are the picks. Either you're going low with the Optoma UHD50, which might just squeak in there, fully zoomed in, 9 feet 8 inches is the bare minimum, or what I'm hoping will be the Epson 5050 UB very shortly.
So he's read and watched reviews of many of the budget 4K DLP projectors. All of those reviews mentioned how these under $1,500 models produce a white border that basically looks like light leakage all around the outside of the image. Would the black felt frame of his screen make that completely invisible? Not completely.
Not completely, and pretty much that white border is between 2 and 3 inches in size of kind of a lit up border. So if you just threw it on a wall and you threw up like a black rectangle, you'd see the black rectangle and then kind of an illuminated halo around the whole thing. And that has to do with the fact that they're moving this panel around to use it 4 times per frame, which exactly what the UHD50 does. So if you have a big, thick border, it'll absorb it pretty darn well.
Right.
But if you have a thin border around it, you might actually see some light spillage beyond the border of the black frame, although you have that black frame. So it's still, I mean, to me, that isn't the biggest problem with them. The biggest problem with those ones is the black levels just aren't great. Like on that UHD50, the black levels just aren't great.
Right.
That's just the way it is. I would vastly prefer to get the Epson 4000, even though it's also $1,500. It has much better contrast and black levels. So, but the zoom range.
He's considering getting the Panasonic UB820 Ultra HD Blu-ray player. Would he see a considerable benefit over LG's much less expensive Ultra HD Blu-ray player with any of these 4K HDR projectors?
Possibly.
I mean, it's the thing we like about the Panasonic is what, the dynamic tone mapping thing.
Yeah, well, it's not dynamic tone mapping.
Stuff. It's the SDR stuff.
Right. Well, no, that would be like the Sony or the Oppo that does the SDR.
That's what I was thinking of. This is not the Sony one?
No, this is the Panasonic. And what the Panasonic does nicely is you can tell it what you want the maximum light level to be, and then it will tone map everything to that maximum light level. Now, it is still looking at the metadata, but so the thing is, in any of these low-cost projectors, they're using one tone curve regardless of what the HDR is, right? If the HDR peaks at 1,000 nits, 4,000 nits, 10,000 nits, doesn't matter. It applies the same tone curve to all of it, which means that things that are mastered to a really bright level are either going to have a whole bunch of detail clipped off at the top, or everything is going to look way too dark. The Panasonic will actually apply different tone curves based on the metadata, and you can tell it, okay, tone map everything down to 100 nits maximum or 150 nits maximum, which is what these projectors are going to put out. And it'll do a good job of that. So could it make some, it's not going to be every single disc, but could it make some discs look better than the projector just doing it itself? You know, you're just feeding the thing without any tone mapping in the player. Could it look better than the projector itself? The answer is yes, it could, but it's a $500 player, and you're talking about a $1,500 projector. So it's a little bit tough to justify. I'm hoping Panasonic announced the UB450, which is like the 820 but not as expensive. I'm hoping that comes out in North America. So all of these things, maybe wait just a little bit. See if the 5050 UB Epson projector comes out, and see if Panasonic's UB450 player comes out at a lower price point. That could all be worthwhile.
All right, Dre. Last time we spoke with Dre, his townhouse basement was still completely unfinished, and we were focusing on what we thought he needed to be done in terms of constructing the room for decent sound isolation, maximum size, given the placement of pipes and ducts, and figuring out how to best finish the ceiling with a large heat recovery ventilator in it. So if you're watching the finished product, you'll see what we initially saw was a room. I remember this guy because we were like, what? But it's pink insulation on the walls, gray sheeting and stuff. It was just a bare ceiling. There's just nothing in here. So flash forward to today, and his theater is finished. It's 15 feet long, 13 feet wide, and about 7.5 feet tall, except where the soffits were necessary. He's using old carpeting for now, which will eventually replace with dark gray carpeting. He's got a few last questions that he'll get to in a moment here. Since he's in Canada, he bought all of his equipment from Canadian retailers, including East Porters, Gibby's, Visions, Sonic Boom Audio, and Amazon. He went with a 108-inch slim bezel reference white Illumin Vision screen and an Optoma UHD51A projector that fits his shorter throw distance and budget nicely. He decided that he really wanted 2 rows of seats, so he went with a slightly smaller screen and opted to put his primary seats a bit closer. He's got 5 feet from the back of his seats to the back wall, so he ordered 3 theater chairs with additional 7-inch height built into them. His couch is low, so the extra tall chairs in the back mean he doesn't need a riser. He's got an OLED upstairs, and the Optoma can't compete with that on black levels, but for sheer size, he's loving it so far. So his theater looks great. It's gray walls.
It looks great. It looks terrific.
White,
yeah,
maybe grayish wall. I mean, they're kind of a brownish gray. He's got it looks like dark panels in here mostly. The back wall's a different color. Is that right? Or is it
I think it's just showing in the photos,
right.
I think pretty uniform color in there as far as I can tell. Yeah.
Yeah. The panels are mostly black. It looks like all the way around. He's got tower speakers up front, a subwoofer up on the front left, fixed frames. Got lights in the ceiling, lights on the sconces on the walls. His subwoofer is.
He's got one up front in the front left,
and on the back right.
That's right.
That's right. Okay. And he's got an equipment rack in the back left, and then he's got a bunch of different absorbers, 2 behind his head, 2 on each side wall. It looks like, yeah. So maybe more than that, maybe 3 on each side wall. All right, here we go. He bought the more affordable Peerless equipment rack and Panamax power protection, a dead-end X4500H, and an audio source amp 100. Paradigm monitor V7 speakers all around, and 4 KEF in-ceiling Atmos speakers. He had planned on dual PB2000 subs, but came across a killer deal on an SB2000. So he ended up with 1 of each in diagonally opposite corners. Acoustic panels came from Acoustic Panels of Canada or whatever. So the front one is the SB2000. The back one is the PB2000, which explains why I was confused why that back one was so big, but now I know. So currently in these pictures, he's only got 1 row of seats. The second row of seats will be higher and I guess on the back wall is what I'm guessing. So, and there's a DVD player back there in the little trash can. Questions. Any problem with using 1 PB2000 and 1 SB2000 in here? No.
No. In this room size and it's fully
No.
enclosed, you are totally fine.
No. So, okay, 1 PB2000 and 1 SB2000 in here. No. In this room size and it's fully enclosed, you are totally fine. No. So, okay, 1 PB2000 and 1 SB2000 in here. No. In this room size and it's fully enclosed, you are totally fine. No. No, we'll get to it in a second. So we took our advice of putting the surround and surround back speakers 1 to 2 feet above seated ear level. That worked out very well with for his surround backs, as it gave him just enough clearance for his equipment rack. But since his front seats are low, he's wondering if having the surround speakers 5 feet off the ground is too high. He's got a bit of play with the speaker wire, the way the speaker wires were run. So should he lower them? Well, if you're going to put chairs back there, I'm guessing no would be my guess. I would guess leave them high. I would rather have them cheated a little high than not in this case.
Yeah, I mean, so I mean, the surround backs, given where that rack is placed now and everything, those are fine. And plus, you're going to have seats that are a bit elevated in the back anyway.
Yeah.
So that's totally fine. Yeah, the side surrounds, I mean, I guess they could be lowered a little bit. That wouldn't really hurt anything, but how much would it help?
I don't think it. Yeah, I mean, and aesthetically too, all the speakers kind of in line with each
They're
other.
all at the same height. That's what he went for right now.
I'd say leave them. I would leave them.
Yeah,
I mean, they're not optimally placed. I'll put it to you that way. But I don't think they're suboptimally placed. I mean,
this is where they would have gone prior to Atmos for sure.
Yeah. So what are our opinions of how he's positioned his absorption panels? There's a spot below the small window where another panel could go. Anywhere else, or should he, or any he should move? Okay, so I can't find this window he's talking about. Where the heck is it?
Okay, so to the left of the screen, he's got some blinds. They're very short because this is just a basement window. But there are some blinds, and then there's 2 panels, one of which is directly below one of those blinds, and one that's just to the left of it. And he's like, there's another space just below the other set of blinds there that you could put another panel.
The only place I want you to put a panel is right beside your front left and right speakers.
Uh-huh.
That's the only thing. Well, I mean, cheat your center forward a little bit and place a tri-traps all the way across the ground back there.
Oh, you could. I mean, that's quite far forward that you'd have to move everything.
I mean, dude, the things are only like 2.5 feet deep. They're not that. I mean, if that, maybe 2 feet deep. They're not that deep. And then you can cheat depending on which one you buy, you can cheat the stand underneath.
But I mean, I could see just putting a panel, just a regular panel, like a 2-inch thick panel behind the center speaker, and then some panels basically in the corners behind your front left and right speakers.
Yeah, so the only places that I really see, I mean, getting that first reflection point would be nice for your front left and right speaker. But
it's the door. It's the door on the right. So.
Is it the door?
On the right-hand side, that's his door. That's the first reflection point is his door.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Okay. Yeah.
So, I mean, you could put a panel on your door if there's a way to do that, but I'm not going to say that's something you really must do because it's not necessarily convenient. But yeah, basically the front corners and right behind your center speaker, that would be an option. But other than that, everything else looks quite good to me.
Yeah, I like it. His Panamax surge protector has a red warning light on, indicating that some sort of wiring fault, although everything seems fine to power on and functions just fine. He's already got a call into his contractor, but is it common for surge protectors to incorrectly say there's a wiring fault? Boy, that would really make me concerned, I gotta be honest with you. Well, I would be very concerned.
It's almost always just a ground, which could be as simple as you have one of your electrical outlets that's on that circuit that wasn't properly grounded somehow. You'll get the fault thing there, which it's not like it's going to stop the electricity from flowing. It is just the grounding.
Yeah.
But I haven't come across it saying there's an error when there isn't, unless the whole thing is just fritzing.
Right.
But I don't think that's what his power conditioner is doing.
No, I don't think so either. I mean, the fact that everything's turning on and off fine means that whatever the problem is probably pretty minor. And a grounding, while it's not something you don't want to, it's nice to know and to fix, it's not something that's going to stop things from working or damage your equipment. So he asked, lastly, any other suggestions for him? His sources are an NVIDIA Shield and Xbox One X. No, I mean, I think this is a great looking theater, man.
This is terrific. I mean, it came together faster than I expected, but your contractor appears to have, I mean, at least as far as finishing goes, who knows what's behind the walls, we can't tell. But as far as finishing goes, things look darn nice in here. You set things up really well, in my opinion. I mean, if you didn't put the additional panels that we talked about, it'd be no skin off my back. I wouldn't even worry about it.
No, I wouldn't either.
So as far as how the soffits were all done in that, I think that's terrific. I think it's come together really nicely.
And you could just take one of your panels off your walls, a couple of your panels off your walls, and put them into the side of your front left and right speaker, and ask yourself, does this seem to be making a difference?
Did this make any difference? That's right. Yeah.
If it doesn't, then go on with your life.
So we'll just let people who are hearing the behind-the-scenes version know that when I attempted to screen share, my Google Hangout window decided to say not responding, and it's frozen where it is. So I'm not going to change it because we can still hear each other, but there you go. Behind the scenes, folks. Hooray.
I can see you just fine.
Oh, well, my
yeah, you're moving.
Yeah, well, it's probably not switching back to you for anyone watching because I had put it on me, so I should screen share and.
Well, I mean, I don't know if it would even show me to me when I'm talking.
Oh, whatever. Anyway, whatever. Behind the scenes, that's what you get.
Mike is getting close to putting up drywall in his 20-foot by 13-foot theater. As a reminder, the only pieces of gear in the actual theater room are his Xbox One, his projector, and of course his speakers and subs. All of his other gear is in the equipment rack outside the theater that necessitates some long cable runs, all pulled through a shared soffit and bulkhead. He bought two 60-foot Monoprice Dynamic View active HDMI cables, which worked at first when he tested them, but once he fully extended them and had them running next to other wires, they didn't work, so we set the pony up for fiber optic HDMI cables instead. Well, now all the cabling has been run inside conduit, and Mike has a tip. Oh God, thank God the next part of that sentence was he has a tip, and it's not, and now it doesn't work again, because I would have been very sad. So Mike has a tip: use lube. That's just a good life tip, Mike.
It's a good tip in general.
In general, you never know. He has 6 90-degree turns in his conduit, which seemed to be a problem at first. But with lubed-up wires, what the heck did he lube them up with, do you think? Vaseline?
I'm not sure. Some kind of lubricant.
Gross. It was nearly effortless. It turned out one of the HDMI runs, the one going to projector, works fine with the Dynamic View active HDMI cable. Only the slightly longer run to his Xbox required the fiber optic HDMI cable, and thankfully it all seems to be working well. His JVC RS540 looks extremely bright and beautiful on his 120-inch silver ticket screen, even without the theater being fully blacked out yet, and the slow HDMI handshaking isn't that bad. He timed it. It's like 5 to 10 seconds on average for him. Okay, there we go. So it's still studs and insulation only, but he's got speakers on. It's got speakers on the studs set up all the way around. This is a man who cannot wait for drywall to go up. So he's already bought dual SVS SB2000 subs, and even without drywall up, they already sound great, and he can feel plenty of tactile input. So naturally, he wants to know if he should already upgrade them to SB3000s while he's still within SVS's generous trade-up time. SVS did say that SB3000s can play even lower and louder, and someone else with a similarly sized room said they heard an improvement in the deepest bass. Should he upgrade? You heard an improvement in the bass that you quite literally cannot hear, because that's the deepest bass. That's the bass you cannot hear. You can only feel it.
It was also probably just it was louder overall. So
yeah.
Which SVS is not like. They can play even louder and lower. That is factually, objectively true.
That is true.
You don't even have walls up, and you're like, I can already feel these SB2000s, and it's really good. Should I upgrade them?
No, you should not upgrade.
No, you don't need to spend your money there. You got appropriate subs for your room.
Yeah, should he use wall plates for his speaker wire? He's thinking of the only reason to potentially use them near his rear rack would be for organizational purposes, and he's not particularly worried about that. So what would be the best in the theater itself? He's gone to the trouble of double drywall with green glue, so better to have wall plates or just small holes in the double drywall with the speaker wire coming directly through it. Well, I mean, you went through the trouble of soundproofing, and then you're just going to punch a hole and stick a wire through it. I mean, you can seal up all around that wire with caulking and all that, I guess. And the alternative is you're putting in like an actual electrical box, right? Because a wall plate would just go on a regular single gang box. Which, if you do that, you want to do what you would do around any single gang box in a soundproof room, which is you put the putty on the back of it. You get that soundproofing putty thing, and you cover over the back of that single gang box so that it's all sealed up and there's no air movement. And you might even go to the extent of when the wall plate is actually on, you caulk around it so that the air can't move at all. So it's
Do you caulk around a little hole that's only big enough for the wire to poke through, or do you putty and caulk around an entire wall plate?
Dude, you're going through all this trouble
Yeah.
to have a great theater,
Yeah.
and you're just going to have wires sticking out of a wall.
I know. I do
the wall plate.
I do the wall plate, but you want to make sure you do it properly. That you absolutely want to do the putty and caulk.
So he picked up 3 pairs of Focal Superbird speakers for dual side surrounds and surround backs before all the stock was gone. And he got a great deal on some clearance Sonance in-ceiling speakers from Best Buy Magnolia. So he's all set for Atmos speakers. All along, he had planned on upgrading his front 3 Boston Acoustic speakers, and he had originally planned on getting SVS Prime Towers and SVS Ultra Center. But he knows that we don't seem to recommend SVS speakers all that often. He wants the ability to hit full reference volume from 12 feet away if he ever wants to. So he's open to suggestions, although he says he's in favor of towers for the left-right since he just prefers the look. As someone who has spent most of his life preferring the look of towers, I very much prefer the form factor of
A bookshelf
speakers. We recommend SVS speakers more often than many other brands, and their speakers sound very, very good. So if those are speakers that you want and you've heard them before, or even if you haven't, and I think you're going to be fine with those. I got no problems with them. Hitting full reference volume from 12 feet away,
no problem.
Not going to be an issue here, dude. You're going to be just fine. So
yeah, I mean, we do talk about RBH a lot. We talk about Ascend a lot. Yeah, that's true.
Off podcast last week, Rob and I were talking about speakers. I was like, man, if I ever got rid of these Aperions, I would totally go for the RBH. The
Impression Elites.
Elites.
Yes.
I would go for those in a heartbeat. I'd be very interested in hitting Rob's speakers too, but I don't know if I want to pay that much money for speakers. I'll be honest with you.
So, but I often recommend the SE series, which is much more affordable. And if you got any of those, if you got the Ascend SEs, if you got the RBH Impression Elites, if you got Aperion various speakers, I mean, any of those, all of them we'd give a thumbs up, and we'd give a big thumbs up to the SVSs as well. So we have no reason.
And if you listened to us a year ago, you would have heard a lot more SVS recommendations. It's just lately we haven't been, and it's not because we feel any differently about them.
Right.
They just sometimes they come to mind, sometimes they don't.
I think your plan is solid, and there's no reason to steer you away from it.
Yep. So he'd like to have battery backup power protection in his equipment rack, preferably something he could plug all of his gear into, including this Denon X6400H receiver, and an extension that helps to run his projector in the theater. What do we recommend? J series from APC.
Yep. So there's the J25, which is a little bit more affordable. It doesn't come with rack ears, but it will fit into any rack as long as you just put a shelf, right? And I've never seen a rack system that doesn't allow you to install a shelf to hold a component that doesn't have rack ears. So you just put in a shelf if you want it inside, or you can sit it on top or sit it on the bottom shelf, whatever it is. But J25 is the more affordable one. There is the J35, and the upgrades that you get with the J35 are that it has automatic voltage regulation. The J25 doesn't. It has a longer life battery. That's mostly what you're paying for. And it has master and slave outputs on the back, whereas the J25 doesn't have master and slave outputs. So if that's worth the extra, it's about $120 extra for those features, you could consider that.
Just remember, the reason, unless you're Rob, the reason that you are getting a battery backup for your projector is to ensure that your projector has the proper amount of time to cool down its bulb once the power goes out.
Yeah.
It is not to keep your theater running
while
there's a power outage. So having the extended battery life, to me, is not as big of a sell as, because it doesn't take, 5 minutes?
Yeah.
It's if you've been running your projector for a while, 5 minutes or less for your projector to cool down. Then once it's cooled down, your battery backup is at that point is not doing anything. Rob also plugs in his cable box so that his DVR will also continue to run.
Yeah.
That's fine too. But that takes very little power. So
it's 60 watts is basically what a DVR takes. And so like I have both a J25 and a J35, and the J25, everything I've put into standby, but I leave my cable box running, still recording a show. There's a blackout. It'll run for about an hour and a half, whereas the J35 will run for over 2 hours. So that's what that extra battery life is getting me. And hey, if I'm recording a hockey game, it's nice if I can see the ending. So, you know, there's that.
What's more Canadian than recording a hockey game and caring about it? I love it, man. I wish I went and saw the Tampa Bay Lightning. Oh, yeah. My wife got tickets.
They're a very, very good team this year. So.
Yeah, they were crushing.
Yeah,
whoever they were playing, which is they don't ever say the team's names, or at least I can't hear them. So they show the logos or whatever they call them, the mascot, whatever we call the T-shirt thingy, and I'm like, well, I know the Lightning is that blue bolt, but I have no idea what these other. I have no idea who anybody else is at all. So. All right, so he only planned on having his Xbox One in his theater, but now he's thinking that he might like to have additional sources in the theater itself. Would it be a bad idea to put an HDMI switch on the end of the 75-foot fiber optic HDMI cable so they can plug in more sources?
It would definitely need to be a powered switch.
Yeah, okay, so anytime you add something like this, you're risking limiting bandwidth on some level. And if your projector is just barely squeaking by getting everything, you're really running the risk of screwing stuff up here. So to me, I mean, man, dude, this whole thing's just so much easier.
I mean, it should be okay.
Harmony.
It should be. Yeah. Make sure it's a powered HDMI switch, because those active cables, and including the fiber optic ones, they do need to draw power from their HDMI connections. So you want to make sure it's a powered switch. It should be okay. But hey, you know, buy it from Amazon, and if it doesn't work, you send it back.
So this cable is going from his Xbox all the way back to the receiver.
All the way back to the receiver, which is in a rack in a different room. And
the receiver is sending it back via the physical cable, the active cable, but not the fiber optic one, to the projector.
Right, so he's got fiber optic from the Xbox all the way back to his AV receiver, and then he's got a copper but active HDMI cable going from the receiver all the way up back to his projector.
I would buy a high-quality switch, buy a high-quality short-run cable, because you need that, or a couple of those, actually.
Yeah.
Because you'll need those. And then I would plug it in and make sure I bought from a good place with a good return policy.
Yep.
Because this has the potential to be a headache.
It should work, but we're not going to guarantee it. Yeah.
So he'll be using a Harmony Elite remote. Should he put the hub in his theater and run a long IR blaster extension over to his rack, or put the hub in the rack and run the long IR blaster extension to his theater? Maybe use two hubs with one remote somehow. Well, the hub is what receives the connections.
Yeah,
right?
so the remote that you have in your hand is sending a radio frequency signal to the hub.
So the hub has to be within radio frequency range.
Yeah.
Which means the hub then sends, you need IR blasters going out from there to make sure that everything that needs to get IR blasted, which would be your Xbox or whatever sources are in your room, then all those sources in your rack. So, you know, most people just put, because the hub itself is also an IR blaster.
Oh, yes.
So you put the hub near your sources, and it's, you know, it's lighting up like a Christmas tree. We just can't see it because it's, you know, infrared.
That's right.
We can't see it, but it's lighting up over there, and it controls everything without you having to really add any IR blasters at all. In my case, because my rack is a little bit behind a corner, I have to have a little blaster that's just basically sitting on the floor and hanging out, so that it can blast to my projector.
But then to also control all the stuff that's in a rack in another room, obviously.
Yep.
So I would do the first option. I would have the hub in the theater with you, because then you'll never have any problem with the remote in your hand sending its radio frequency to the hub that's in the same room. That'll never be a problem. That'll control everything, including your projector that's in the room with you. And then you run the long extension, because it has two IR blaster extension connections on the back of the hub. You're going to run one or two long extensions back over to your rack and use the smaller little mini IR blasters that it comes with to control everything that's in your rack. I would do it that way.
So we said to wire his dual side surround speakers in series. And since he was only pulling one speaker wire on each side, we said to make it extra long so that the red lead could go to speaker 1 and the black lead could go to speaker 2, and then he just need a single wire connector connecting speaker 1 to speaker 2. But he didn't wait to hear that advice. He just heard, Yes, or something. I don't know. And now his speaker wires are too short to do that. Can he just extend one lead with a wire nut, or should he just connect speaker 1 as normal and then run a red and black from speaker 1 to speaker 2 to make a parallel connection? His X6400H says they can power 4 ohm speakers, so maybe that would be okay. It would probably be okay, but it's
probably, but I'm not super in favor of it.
Yeah, but there are butt splicer things.
Yes, butt splice. That's what you
which is
need.
fine. Now, okay, can you use a wire nut and connect these things and then wrap the whole thing in electrical tape? And yeah,
well, it'll function for as long as the wires stay connected. Sure,
it'll be fine. So I would. But most of the time, whenever you do that, you should put it in a box.
I mean, it has to be in a junction box. Whereas the butt splice, I mean, this is in-wall wiring, so you want to do this properly, and butt splices are pennies. So get a proper butt splice with the shrink tubing. You crimp it on, you shrink tube it. It's never going to come loose. That's all you need. Very simple.
Yeah. Clarence moved a 55-inch Samsung JS7000 TV into another room and replaced it with a 55-inch Vizio P series. He's noticed that when he's viewing the Vizio on axis, it looks great and is clearly an upgrade over the older Samsung. But when he moves to either side, it drastically washes out. The Samsung wasn't nearly as bad from off-axis. So is the Vizio just known to behave this way, or is there something in the settings or maybe a defect causing this? He's got a P series that's an LCD.
It is, and it is a vertically aligned, a VA panel. And you're seeing exactly what it does. That's the off-axis viewing of vertically aligned LCD panels is really, really poor. Your JS7000 that you had before did use an IPS panel, an in-plane switching LCD panel, which are known to have much wider viewing angles, but the trade-off is their contrast isn't as high and their black levels aren't as good. So when you're on axis, you're seeing what that lovely vertically aligned LCD panel does, which is give you nice deep black levels and higher contrast. But as you move off axis, it completely washes out. It's no defect. It is that's the way it goes. And the alternative is OLED, which is much more expensive, or in-plane switching, which gives you the wider viewing, but at the cost of contrast and black levels. So no free lunch.
He just wanted to say thanks for fueling his interest in home theater and helping him make so many worthwhile purchases. He has 5 kids, and family movie night in the movie room has become a special time for them. Because of us, he got a Marantz receiver, Kef and Sonnets speakers, Epson projector, silver ticket screen, dual SVS PP12 NSDs, subwoofers that rock, he says. And you probably got them on sale at that one time when they were all on sale. It's brought his whole family a lot of enjoyment, and he's happy to support the podcast. Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. And this is really why we're doing this. I mean,
heck yeah.
Believe me, we're not.
What it's all about.
We do this because we like talking about AV, but I mean, the reality is we're helping people, and our community, and I hate it when people say this on YouTube and stuff like that, but our community is actually really quite supportive.
Yes.
The little niche group of people that we've surrounded ourselves with, we're not so big as to get the trolls. And we're just big enough.
We got like 1 or 2, but that's about it.
Well,
which is hardly any in online terms, is it?
I was going to say I've had trolls in that will have showed up to my podcast once a year to just say I still hate you.
What lives they must lead.
I hated you 10 years ago, and surprisingly, I still hate you. I'm like, wow.
Hey, this was a long weekend. I'm sure our downvoter on YouTube has gone back through all of our videos that he missed. Oh. What a life you lead.
You know, I found out recently downvotes basically to YouTube count just as much as upvotes.
Okay.
So it's actually...
It means somebody interacted.
That's right. Somebody cared enough to click, even if they clicked down. So the most downvoted video is just as important to them as the most upvoted video, as long as it's not offensive. So yes, we are very happy to help you, Clarence. And if, just keep asking questions. I'm glad you guys are enjoying it. I know we do too.
Yeah.
Shawn. I mean, how long have we been going, dude? I feel like we've been
we got about 15 minutes left here. We got 22 questions left. Yay.
Oh, my God. We have 22 questions left?
No, 12 questions left.
Shawn says he went with our advice and bought a 65-inch LG C8 OLED with a Sony X800 Ultra HD Blu-ray player. He loves them and thinks the quick picture quality is absolutely amazing. Now he'd like to make his next upgrade. Boy, we are so good at spending other people's money. His living room is open concept, about 5,000 cubic feet of total space, and of course the TV area is only a portion of that, and he isn't looking to fully pressurize the entire space, but he wants a subwoofer that can still handle itself and not sound strained. Max budget would be $1,500, but less would be better. Any suggestions? $1,500. I mean, Power Sound Audio is,
sure.
I mean, it would be the place to go to get I think, probably the most output for the least amount of money.
Right, the most output for the least amount of money. That would be true, yeah.
HSU would be a good alternative as well to that value choice there, but neither one of those boxes are going to be pretty.
Oh, those are big boxes.
Yeah. So
I also want to point out like Monoprice's THX ported subs. They have a 15-incher that's $1,400. So it fits the budget, and what I like about Monoprice's subs is similar to SVS is they are unbreakable. They've got the DSP protection. Turn them up literally as loud as they can possibly go, and they will just politely refuse to play any louder. But all of those are huge boxes. I'm not sure if that's... I mean, and actually, those are ones that are capable of pressurizing the entire 5,000 cubic feet. So, I mean, we're going to come back to our stalwart, but what about an SVS PC-2000?
Yeah.
It's the cylinder... It's not going to pressurize 5,000 cubic feet. It doesn't have that kind of output, but it's also $800 instead of $1,500. You could actually get two of them for $1,500 if you want to spend the whole budget and get dual subs. You could get dual PC-2000s. It's got the isolation feet built in. It's the lovely cylinder shape that takes up a lot less floor space. Yeah.
Now that they've taken the ports off the top, you can actually... You know, not worry about things dropping into it.
And
so,
I mean, here's a case where maybe an SB3000 at $1,000, that could be a nice choice. Sealed sub, not going to fully pressurize 5,000 cubic feet, but that's fine. But now it's a little bit of a more compact box, at least being the sealed version.
You can put and you have a chance of maybe turning it into an end table or something like that.
You know, I mean, this room size, this is finally the case where I'm going to say, in your case, paying the bit extra for the SB3000 would make sense over the SB2000. Because just sheer room size, you want something that is capable enough that, you know, if you want to, it could. So, yeah, PC-2000, SB-3000, or the Monoprice 15-inch, or if you want the value and something that actually can handle 5,000 cubic feet, HSU and Power Sound.
Mark asks, do we have any opinions about JBL's Arena Series speakers? They're normally in the $200 to $300 pair bookshelf, $500 to $700 pair tower price range, and they've borrowed some design elements, mainly the wave cloud on the tweeter, from the flagship M2 studio monitors. Most reviews seem quite positive, and they're sometimes available at very low prices, worth an audition. Well, everything's worth an audition, sir.
Sure.
So I'm looking at them now for the very first time.
I will tell you, I looked into these, the drivers that they use a little bit. Those are some cheap drivers. Those are really, really cheap woofer and tweeter, but in a good design. So it's, you know, I mean, this is a perfectly reasonable thing to do. These are JBL's entry-level speakers. These are going up against Pioneer Andrew Jones. These are going up against eARC Debut. And up against those, I'll bet they perform very nicely. I haven't heard them. I don't know. They're worth an audition. It's a good design. It is really cheap parts.
Right. I mean, it's an MTM design for the center channel. Yeah, I mean, it all looks pretty reasonable.
Yep. I mean, that waveguide is good. They've got a proper crossover in them. So, you know, the cabinets.
I'm telling you right now, and I would be absolutely 100% shocked if those tower speakers were anything other than a bookshelf, one of the bookshelf speakers on a stand.
Yeah, that's
so. When you're looking at budget speakers like this, and it just as a general, you want to look at to see where the port is on the back. I didn't do that. I should do that real quick. You want to look at where the port is on the back, because if the port on the back is real high,
it's just a stand.
It's just a stand. It's a bookshelf speaker that they've built into a longer box. Going back to our sandwich analogy, I am going to look because I want to see if you can. I mean, it's only $50 extra. It's gotta be, man. It's gotta be just a stand, because there's no way they did the port back there. Let me see real quick.
Well, in any case, he was also saying that he was having difficulty finding the matching Arena Center speaker in stock at below its full retail price, because I guess he's not totally interested in them if they're at full retail, so he was looking for a sale on that. But would it be difficult to match the Arena towers with a different brand center and
Probably.
Probably a little bit, yeah. I mean, that waveguide is kind of unique. That's a thing they've patented and all that, which is, just to give it very even dispersion. And assuming that, I mean, it's JBL, they must be targeting pretty flat frequency response. But JBL Consumer is significantly different from JBL Pro. And their speakers don't necessarily always sound like JBL Professional speakers. So, I'd lean towards just trying to find that same matching center. Again, haven't heard them, so I could be totally wrong about that. But that waveguide is a little bit unique, and the JBL Consumer often has a little bit of a sound that doesn't match everything.
And the port is over halfway down the middle of that speaker, so it could
also just be a big old hollow box.
Right, could be.
Yeah.
So that might give it a little bit more bass.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't tell anybody like absolutely not. Don't even audition them. No, not.
Well, especially if you can find them on sale. Yeah, that's when I start like, hey man, you're speaking my language.
That's right.
And if this is your first set of speakers, I mean, that makes me even more inclined, especially when you talk about sales. JBL, the synthesis system is one of my systems that I would love to experience in my house or in a home or in anywhere. Every time I've heard it, it's been amazing. So I mean, it's not like they can't make great speakers, but entry level speakers,
different branches,
yeah. Entry level speakers are always a compromise, and a lot of times the reason why we recommend on internet direct on speakers is simply because JBL and these other companies, they have more overhead when it comes to what they can do. Now, Pioneer Andrew Jones speakers, entry-level speaker, mass market, we recommend them all the time. These could be the same thing. We haven't heard them ourselves, so we can't. Not yet. All right. Infinite Gary. The OLED panels manufactured by LG Display and used by every TV brand that sells OLED TVs are referred to as RGBW, since they include 4 subpixels for every pixel, your standard red, green, blue, but also a fourth, a white subpixel. As Gary understands it, that white subpixel is there to boost brightness, but when it's on, it also desaturates the bright colors, correct?
That is correct, yes.
All right. There you go. So are the latest quantum dot displays actually more color accurate than OLEDs?
In strict terms of what they call color volume, right? So if you think of what we call color gamut, which is the range of colors, how deep can the red, the green, and the blue be, and then that forms a triangle, and you have all the colors contained within that triangle. That is your gamut. But that is like a two-dimensional look at all the colors that are produced. Color volume is when you take that triangle and then expand it to how dark can all those colors get and how bright can all those colors get. And in the case of an OLED with this white subpixel that they're using, as the light goes up, they start brightening that white subpixel, which means the colors themselves aren't really getting brighter. Your eye is seeing more photons, but those photons are white, not individual colors. So you're getting however bright the red subpixel can get, plus the added photons of the white subpixel. But that didn't make the red any deeper. It just made your eye say, oh, that's brighter. And it actually desaturates the color a little bit. So could a quantum dot display be more color accurate? Yet at the very brightest colors, yes. Right? The signal is saying, give me this specific shade of red, this bright. The OLED will say, well, I'll get as close to that brightness as I can, but I'm going to have to be pumping this white subpixel to do it, and I'm not actually reaching that full red saturation. The quantum dot could get that bright at that color. So technically, yes.
So he asks, is there a new TV model announced at CES this year that stands out as the most color accurate? Now, we've been down this rabbit hole with many listeners, including Gary, on a number of occasions, where we get focused on a single performance metric of anything. That will also often lead us to erroneous conclusions in purchases that basically, hey, this has got the best black levels. You're like, okay, well, that's what I care about. Black levels, I'm in. And then you buy it and you're like, the off axis is
there you go.
Garbage, or it takes 35 to 45 seconds to switch between sources.
There's a blur or
that motion blur or something else. Yeah, it does the blacks really well. but it doesn't do the other things well at all. So let's not get lost. I mean, I'm sure there's an answer to this. I don't know what it is.
Well, ironically, it's an OLED. It was Panasonic's GZ2000 OLED, which is so color accurate that several places that make movies and do the color correcting, like one of them said, yeah, we just bought 60 of them to put in all of our color correction suites because we want a 65-inch screen to double check what we did on the 30-inch screen so that when it's a little bit larger, does it still look that good? And it's good enough that production houses are like, yep, good enough for us to use. So that went out. Also, LG did an interesting thing, which is if you have the Calman software, you are actually now able to turn off that white subpixel in the 2019 LG OLEDs so that only the red, green, and blue stay active. Now, that limits the total light output to about 400 nits instead of the 700 or 800 that you can get when the white subpixel is active. But if you want fully saturated colors that just aren't quite as bright, you can now actually turn off the white subpixel in the 2019. So ironically, the OLEDs are the most color accurate, just not as bright.
So we asked, what actually looks sharpest? Watching a 1080p Blu-ray on a 1080p display so that every pixel in the source is mapped one-to-one to a pixel on the display, or watching that same 1080p Blu-ray on a 4K or 8K display where it's being upscaled? Can the higher resolution display genuinely improve the lower resolution source, or is it just going to jack up the image in some way? Well, the answer here is somewhat varied. You know, the one-to-one pixel mapping means that you're getting exactly what the image was meant to be.
Yeah.
Okay. So you know that, but the scaling is such that the scaling from up to 4K up to 8K from a distance, I think is going to look basically the same. As you're looking at it, you're not going to see a blurry image on the 4K or the 8K.
Right.
What's going to happen is as you move closer,
you won't see pixels on the higher resolution display.
Yeah, exactly. You won't see the pixels anymore, so you'll be able to get closer to them. So then the 1080p one starts to have pixels, and the other ones don't.
Right.
This is not a VHS to HD comparison. This is an HD to an more HD.
Yeah.
I mean,
and again, what makes an image look sharp to our eyes has way more to do than just resolution. If the 8K display has higher contrast than the 1080p display, it's going to look sharper to your eyes.
Sure.
Yeah, even though the resolution, it's not one-to-one, but the higher contrast, or vice versa. The 8K display has way more pixels, but if the 1080p display has much better contrast, it's going to look sharper, even though it's lower resolution.
Yeah. All right, last question here. Paul.
So many left over.
I don't care. At what decibel level do you start getting into hearing loss territory? Well, there's two parts of hearing loss, Paul. Paul, can you hear me? Paul. Now, Paul is our race car driver, so he's probably very aware of this. There's volume, absolute volume, which can create hearing loss. Like, what is it? Like 180 dB is like a jet plane taking off. Right
it's lower than that. Yeah, it's like 140 dB is in that range. Yeah.
But, so a very loud noise can cause hearing loss, or a lower volume noise at a longer period of time.
Yes.
So over time can create hearing loss.
Yes.
So the OSHA has standards for all these things as far as, how long you can be subjected to a sound volume level.
Yeah, and they have actual legal health and safety standards for workers. Like, this is the decibel level you're allowed to be exposed to for this amount of time.
Right. So, a very loud, sharp noise. Going to a concert for 2 hours. I mean, that's why all those bands have hearing loss.
Yup.
Many of them do, because they didn't start wearing those in-ear monitors that actually shut. You can see them nowadays. They shut out everything. Like, it's completely blocked off their ear canal, so that it's a speaker basically, and then it blocks off everything else. But it's pretty loud in there, dude. I don't know.
Yeah, so the standards are, and Health Canada has this standard as well, 85 decibels, A-weighted, though, which means if it's A-weighted, they're basically only looking at 500 to 5,000 hertz. That's basically the frequency range, and frequency makes a difference as well. In the really, really low frequencies, you can actually withstand a higher decibel level for a longer amount of time before it causes hearing loss. And the really, really high frequencies sound so shrill to us that you'll probably run away screaming anyway. So they're looking at a weighting between 500 and 5,000 hertz, but 85 decibels for 8 hours. That's the OSHA thing, whereas Health Canada basically just says 85 decibels and above, you could start to sustain hearing loss. So that's the exact answer to the question. Now, OSHA legally has said for every 5 decibels above 85 decibels, you cut the amount of time in half. So at 90 decibels, 4 hours, 95 decibels, 2 hours, and so on. So
if you think about it, reference level is what, 85 dB, right?
85 decibels, that's right. You shouldn't listen to that for more than 8 hours.
So all you people, including Rob, who went to the Infinity Wars coming out, watch all the Marvel movies in one day.
I put earplugs in. I put in those Eddie Modic ones that reduce all the sound uniformly, so it still sounds good, just quieter. Right. I did that. I was concerned about that because I knew that I was getting into that situation. Also, sat right at the back of the theater, so a little bit quieter. But yeah, the other part of it is though, OSHA themselves has said they actually have a recommendation now, which is a little bit more conservative. It's not legally binding, so you can't sue anybody for this. But they actually now recommend for every 3 decibel increase, cutting the time in half. Which once you get up to like 100 decibels or so, that's a huge difference, right?
Yeah.
Having gone up 5 and having it, or having gone up every 3 and having it. So that I'd probably, to stay safe, go with that more conservative recommendation. And that means up at like 105 decibels, what are we looking at? Just a few minutes, right? Like 15 minutes is like the recommendation, which, 105 decibels, that's the full peak of reference volume. In any of the speakers, and it's like, that should be a momentary peak, not a sustained thing. Definitely not.
So 2-hour movie, 3-hour movie, that's fine.
You absolutely should be fine. Yes.
Yeah. Lord of the Rings marathon, don't listen to it at reference volume.
Right. But anywhere above 85 decibels, you can start to cause yourself hearing loss, and the louder it is, the shorter the duration will be before it starts to cause hearing loss.
Right. All right, who we got left, Rob?
Woo, boy, this is going to take as long as the podcast to name all these people. Nathan D., Carl R., Joseph S., Patrick P., Matt E., which is long and I got to scroll down, Juan H., David B., and there's one more, isn't there? Steve on Twitter. That is everybody on the list.
All right, we want to thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank Andre for going to www.avrant.com and clicking on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link and leaving us a PayPal donation. And we want to thank Clarence and Mark and our other 78 patrons over at patreon.com.
Yeah, Andre, thanks so much for that PayPal donation. Thanks so much to everyone over at patreon.com/AVRant podcast. If you'd like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation, our 80 patrons there, including Clarence and Mark. Thank you.
We want to thank Mike for talking us up to AV Science, Bill from talking us up to Empyrean, and Alan for sharing his theater with SVS and plugging us. So thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, Mike, Bill, and Alan, thank you all so much for the support.
For AVRant, I'm Tom Andrew.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.